Yo, what's going on, guys? Ben here. I'm doing I was going to say very quick one, but to be honest, it's like 20 minutes long. So I tried to be fast, but it is what it is on Terraform and infrastructure as code. So it's not geared at DevOps. It's more for people like myself who are just sort of infrastructure engineers and systems engineers, maybe network engineers as well, who want to build reliable infrastructure using code, which is what Terraform's all about, and it's more of an introduction. So all we're going to do is blast through a video of using VirtualBox to build a VM, publish it into Azure using code. Let's give it a crack. To start with, the Windows server that I've got running here is 2022. I have updated it. I have turned on DHCP. I have turned on remote desktop. So to when we push this into the cloud, right, it obviously needs to have certain sort of Azure friendliness to it. And if you don't have remote desktop on, for example, then how are you going to connect to it once it gets into the cloud? Some of these things you can work around if you forget, but for the sake of making our lives easier, just turn it on. Same with DHCP. So I have these set to automatic. Um, Same deal, right? When it gets sent into Azure, so when we run our text file, to sort of simplify this as much as possible, the text file with all of the configuration in it, like the server name, the IP address, the size of the server, the region, like US West or whatever region, all those settings in there, we're then going to hit publish and it's going to go to the cloud. We can choose the cloud that we want. In this case, I'm going to use Azure. And once it gets there, it's going to have to take it. So it's going to have to get an IP address, for example, right? So if this is the image, obviously then DHCP has to be enabled on the server. So that's done. App wise, I have installed pretty much nothing. I did read somewhere that you've got to remove guest editions. So if you've installed that to make it work, um, you'll have to remove that. I haven't tested it, to be fair, but that's my understanding. And just as a caveat, I'm using VirtualBox because this is a home lab. Obviously, if you're on VMware or Hyper-V, it's much the same, right? We're just creating a VM. It's not rocket science. You don't need to watch me create a server. I'm sure there's other content out there that can do it. The apps, like I said, basic apps here so that we can test that it's working. This is required, the Windows Azure Virtual Machine Agent, because I've made a bunch of changes to this server and removed guest editions. The GitHub repository that Microsoft say to go to is all scrambled and broken. So, for sake of sanity, I'll put this in the description as well, so you can just go straight to that link, download it. I think that's everything. Yeah. So we command line elevate, and then we're going to sysprep it or generalize it. And the point of that, if you're not familiar, is to sort of get the OS ready to be duplicated, right? So if you think about that logically, what would happen if you just cloned your laptop at home, right? So it might have an IP address, or it might have, what's a better example, like license keys. You can't just duplicate that. The SID, which is like a unique identifier for the server itself, especially in like a corporate environment, you definitely don't want duplicate SIDs. So this is sort of getting it ready to be cloned. So once we run this, the out of the box experience is what that stands for. It'll be the out of the box experience once this is done. So as soon as you run this, it'll shut this server down and make it somewhat useless. Like you can't just turn it back on and then go, oh, crap, forgot to remove guest editions first, turn it back on, uninstall it, and sysprep it again, because running this command will generalize it, it'll sysprep it, shut it down, and as soon as you turn it back on again, you're going to get the same out of the box experience where it's got, choose a language and choose a keyboard layout and whatever. So that is why you snapshot it first. Obviously, do that. And all going according to plan, it should shut itself down. once it's done. Sweet. Cool. So that's now done, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, that has shut down now. So once it completes, it will turn itself off as per the command. So pretty straightforward now. Just if you're not in the directory already, just cd to wherever the VirtualBox or whatever hypervisor you're using, the VDI file. So you can see this command pretty straightforward. We're going to take the VDI, we're going to convert it to VHD. See if it works. Cool. Done. We just need to upload it now to Azure. So a bit of a caveat here with, I guess, the way you do it. So you can upload it in Terraform. Generally not recommended because it's not a very reliable sort of session that's maintained when you do it through Terraform. So Wi-Fi drops out for a second, or your laptop screen locks or something, then little things like that can trip it up. So I just used a storage account and uploaded it manually to a container. I'll run through the storage account in a second, but I just created a container here called images and I uploaded it using this. So that seemed to go fine. But then going through the logs, it didn't seem like it had actually, like the images container had a 50 gig file in it, or 50 gig disk in it, I should say. So, but the upload didn't match, even if you consider that the data on that disk might be, say, like 10 gigabytes. The logs seem to show that it did like 4, and it was done far too quickly. I now use the Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer, sometimes called Mace. So yeah, let's go to the storage account first. So there's nothing special about this. Literally, I just spun up a storage account, right? There's nothing fancy about it. If you need to copy anything, you can see it here. Locally redundant storage, because I'm a tight ass and don't want to spend money on it. Default storage account type. The container, same thing. Like, you don't need to watch me set up a storage account. I'm sure you can figure that bit out. The Mace, you connect to it, fairly straightforward. Like, you just install Mace, right? That's literally it. You upload a file. Make sure you've got the right one. So that's the VHD file we just created. Open. It needs to be a page blob. That's it. Upload. So that's a lot more reliable. So the times I've done this in the past, that's a hell of a lot more reliable to do it this way than even using the upload within Azure itself. So yeah, we'll come back to this when it's done, and we'll run our Terraform commands. Cool. All right, so if we have a look at Mace, you can see that it apparently finished. We will see if that is true, how well it worked. So if you've been following the document that this video is kind of embedded into, the text file that I keep sort of referring to is basically a file full of the configuration settings or variables that we want to push into Azure or whatever cloud you're using. So I've done this in Linode. It's much the same. You start with a downloading, configuring the provider or the plugin, which is, if you've ever used APIs, so, like if you wanted to API into whatever Facebook, then you would. So let's say you wanted to create a Facebook post using PowerShell, for example. Then you would have to API into Facebook in order to send it, right? And the API or the connector is different depending on the businesses. So, or the SaaS tools or whatever you're connecting to. So like some will be REST API, some will be a SOAP API. They have different authentication mechanisms. So like a challenge response authentication mechanism, or just an API token, which is kind of like a password to connect with. So the provider / plugin is kind of dealing with that for you. So you can see here, this is downloading the Azure plugin or the provider. And that's so that we don't have to do so much. You don't have to muck around with all of that stuff. It just downloads it for you. So the connector's done. Then these are just settings that you configure for what type of resources you want to build. So I'll put this in the description. Obviously, you can just download these TF files, they're called. The world of Azure is so much more complex than other providers, right? So if you've used Vultr or Linode or any of the other sort of smaller providers, they are much simpler to set up. It's like, what do you want to name the VM? What IP address should it have? What region do you want? And that's it. It's like next, finish. Whereas, as you know from Azure, or if you don't, like if you even if you use the Azure portal to build yourself a VM, it's like 25 pages of questions, because it's like, what type of storage and what type of network performance and all of the new Azure integrated services that they use and the security settings and encryption, and it just goes on and on and on. So you don't have to specify all of that, but you do have to specify the sort of mandatory fields. So, obviously do this in your own secure environment. Don't use don't do this for the first time in your corporate network, because things like this are allowing 3389 for RDP into the server. You want to test this, I would just build your own environment first. And once you're happy, once you're confident, then you work your way up to UDT and then production. So that's that. All you do is literally open up a notepad file and save it as main.tf, put it in your Terraform directory. We're then going to run an initialize. So I've just CD'd into that same Terraform directory. Initialize is just going to build the it's going to download the plugins and prep it. So let's see if it's happy with that. Huzzah. So now we'll plan. And plan is, I guess, doing sort of a basic syntax check to make sure the file's correct. But the most important part is that it will check the state of the existing configuration. Okay, so let's say you already had, this might not be a perfect example, but let's say it already had an IP address, a public IP address, and you then reran the same Terraform because you wanted to increase the storage space on the disk. Okay, so you reran the entire Terraform command. If you're familiar with like firewalls or anything else, you know how it'll sometimes have sort of, when you go to commit your changes, it'll say, okay, this is the running configuration, and these are this is the changed configuration, right? So it'll be, in this case, it might be like the server name, well, that's the same, the IP address, that's the same, the disk, oh, that's different. This one says 50, you're now changing it to 70. So that line will be in red because that's the thing changing. So that's what this is doing. So I don't have anything there. Well, I kind of do, but it's to make it simple. This is adding it. There are no existing changes to be made. I'm not deleting anything. That's why you plan, right? It also hinges heavily off a state file, and that state file is maintaining the existing configuration, right? So, for obvious reasons, if you're in a team, you don't want to have this state file, saved locally on your PC, because then no one else can kind of see the current configuration. That has to be a shared file. So, but yeah, just to keep it simple, you run a plan. Then we apply. A caveat actually before doing this is that this is, you have to log in to the Azure PowerShell. You have to download the PowerShell module and spell that right. AZ login in PowerShell, then MFA if you've got MFA set up to get yourself into this. So you can't just run a normal PowerShell window and run this. You have to log into Azure first. Not that difficult. Cool. So just quick one. I'm still running this. It's been going for about 5 minutes now. So if you see this as well, it is what it is. It takes as long as it takes. It's faster in Azure, about 100,000 times slow if you did it in Linode. So yeah, be grateful it's not Linode. Let's say that. this is the server. You can see its status is creating, so we just have to wait. I came up with a joke. My mum died when we couldn't remember her blood type. She kept saying B positive, but it's so hard without her. Right, I will check back in when this is done. Oh my god, okay, where to begin on how stupid I was then? So, the couldn't figure this one out. So I was deploying it into Azure, and you'd get the control delete lock screen, welcome screen, whatever, and you'd refresh this, and it would show you the like black screen after a while. I just, for the life of me, couldn't figure it out. So I'm making changes to it. Like I kept making progressive changes to it, and it's just not working. I thought, what the hell am I doing wrong? So after like 5 hours of troubleshooting this silly thing, and I must have sysprepped it. Well, you can see that, what's that, 4 times, multiple different changes along the way. Upload the image every time, which takes hours. And I was like, what the hell is going on? So then the penny dropped that when you snapshot it, you're not making changes to the disk. So you've then got a whole bunch of these. So I don't know. I don't have an excuse for that. That's just how stupid I was. Maybe I was decaffeinated or something, but it's like, see, you can hear nothing. It's just hollow in there. That's the problem. So any hoozle, once you so you merge it back into the main one, which you can do different ways. For me, using VirtualBox, I just use this one as the running copy. So I never sysprep this. And then when I'm done and I think, yeah, okay, cool, that's ready to roll now. Right click, clone it. Clone it as whatever you want, name it something else. And then this is the one that you sysprep. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. So just if you want to, keep adding and making changes, do that to the live copy, which you can turn on and turn off whenever you need. And then this is the sysprepped one that once you've shut it down during the sysprep or generalizing, it's off. Don't turn it back on. So yeah, that's about it. So I'll put these steps, in the description as well, but you can see what it was. So I've added a bunch of apps, did the VM agent and DHCP. We already covered that together. Didn't work, so I then turned the firewall off, ran a bunch of commands, which I'll put in the description, and I updated Windows. One of these two things it obviously liked, so I suspect Firewall. I mean, don't do this in a corporate environment, or do it carefully, do it as per policy. But that was it, and then so I uploaded it. I noticed too that the image took way longer, so it was taking like 2 and a bit hours, I think, before, or a few hours, let's say. Whereas this time, the same 50 gig disk took like 6 hours, which is heaps, right? Like 6 hours. So I Googled that, or I AI'd it, right? So you know how big a chicken you could cook in 6 hours? 11 kilos. It's like an ostrich. So that's the key. If you upload it from home and you could cook a regular chicken, something's up. So yeah, that should help. The other thing is that when I don't have this. See that 4.5 minutes, right? Whereas the other, no, I don't have the other one, but the other one was like it failed. It gave me like error, whatever. It just basically says it failed to create the VM. Everything else creates, so it creates all the storage accounts and, oh, sorry, not the storage accounts, like the networks and the network interface card and all the stuff that we've configured in the TF file. It configures all of that and then just fails at the VM. So that's also fun because you've got to delete it all to get a clean test. So anyway, that took 4.5 versus like 15 to 40 minutes to fail. So a good way to think about that is, could you cook a prawn in the time that it takes to run the Terraform? Nothing but wisdom you get from me. So that is done. Finally, the sucker went green. He's all happy. I'm surprised it hasn't been hacked into the stratosphere already because it's just got a public IP and a crappy username and password on it. But here we are. It works. It deployed perfectly. A B series VM runs well, and lo and behold, these are exactly the same apps that are configured. So we know she's working well. I'll tidy this up and I will put the notes in the description.